The following BLTV program is brought to you by O'Flaherty Law. Please enjoy.
Welcome to Learn About Law. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law, and today we're going to explain how to negotiate a commercial lease. A commercial lease is a lease for a business as opposed to a residential lease for a living space. So we'll talk first about the types of commercial leases, and that has an effect on how you negotiate the lease. Then we'll discuss some tips for actually what you need to look out for when negotiating a commercial lease. So first, a single net lease, also known as a net lease, is where the tenant pays for utilities and property taxes on top of a base rent. So those might vary, and they'll pay the actual cost of the utilities and property taxes on top of a fixed base rent, while the landlord is responsible for maintenance, repairs, and insurance over the building. A double net or a net lease includes insurance on the tenant side. So on top of the utilities and property taxes and base rent they're paying, they're also going to cover the actual insurance premiums for the building, while the landlord still pays for maintenance and repairs. A triple net lease has the tenant paying for all of the cost of the building except for structural repairs on top of their base rent. Finally, a full service gross lease has the tenant paying for basically just a flat base rent every month, and the landlord is responsible for all of the costs of the building, and that rent doesn't change based on the cost of the building. The base rent is going to be higher in a full service gross lease than it is in a triple net lease or any of the net leases we've discussed, because the costs of maintaining the building are baked into that base rent by the landlord. So you might be able to get a better deal as a tenant doing something like a triple net lease, because the actual cost, although uncertain, might be less than the actual rent that would be charged in a full service lease, while a full service lease gives you certainty as to the amount of rent you're going to be paying and some of your expenses for occupying that space. So let's talk about some important things you need to think about when negotiating the lease. One is the length of the lease. So a lot of landlords like to have longer leases. A typical lease is 1 to 2 years. Tenants tend to like shorter leases because that gives them flexibility to move or to grow if their business is growing, or to contract if the number of employees are shrinking. So it gives the tenant more flexibility based on changing business environments if they have a shorter lease. The upside of a longer lease is certainty. If your location is very important to you, it gives you certainty over the location. It also allows you to bake a lot of improvements into the lease. So landlords are usually typically more willing to pay for improvements to the property if it's going to be a longer term lease, while they will probably not want to do a lot of construction, or they may want the tenant to pay for construction if it's a shorter term lease. Another advantage of a longer term lease is that it can often be backloaded, meaning that the initial years have a much lower rent than later years, which is often beneficial to business owners because the business owner expects the business to be doing better as time goes on, especially if it's a new business, so they won't notice the higher rent in later years as much as they will appreciate the lower rent in the earlier years. Another thing you want to consider is researching comparable rents, and you want to first make sure you're making an apples to apples comparison. So if you've got a triple net lease, you want to include what you expect to pay for all of the costs of the building on top of base rent, and then figure out a price per square footage and compare that to the price per square footage of any gross leases you're looking at. And that's how you get an apples to apples comparison. But you also want to look at the type of commercial property it is. So there's retail space, which is going to be more expensive than second story space or office building space. And then once you get into office building space, there's multiple classes of office building space, with some being a higher quality than others, and the price per square footage in a market of one class might be different than the price per square footage in a different class's market. So you want to figure out what class of office space suits your needs. How nice does the place need to be? And then once you've done that, you can look at an apples to apples comparison of different properties in that class of office space. And a commercial real estate broker can give you basically a printout or give you a good idea of what the market is if you choose to retain one. So next, here's where the attorney comes in. Make sure that the clauses are favorable to you. So I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of the tenant, but a landlord needs an attorney for the same purpose. I'm talking about it from the perspective of the tenant because I assume most landlords have done this before. They have a pretty good idea of how to negotiate a lease, or they're going to certainly be working with an attorney already to draft their lease. So from the perspective of a tenant, you want to make sure you have the right to sublease or assign the property. If your business changes, if it shrinks, you don't want to be on the hook for that full amount of rent. You're going to want to find some sort of subtenant or someone else to rent the property to, without necessarily having the landlord have absolute veto power over that. Sometimes the middle ground is giving the landlord the right to reasonably deny the sublease, but not unreasonably. So if you find someone with the same commercial circumstances as you, then you should have the right to assign or sublease. And I said commercial, I meant financial circumstances. You want to make sure that the landlord doesn't have the right to lease other properties in the building, other units in the building, to your competitors. So you want to clearly define what is a competitor of your business and make sure that there's not going to be a competitor moving in next door. You want to make sure that whatever signage you're expecting, the landlord approves ahead of time, or that you've got a fair process for getting the landlord approval, because you don't want to pay for basically a first floor space expecting to get a big sign, and then either not have it be approved by the landlord or approved by the village, and have your business plans go out the window when you're not able to put up the sign that you expected. And finally, you want a fair clause for landlord repairs and improvements. So what happens if something goes wrong? Who's going to cover that? A lot of that will be baked into the type of lease it is, but what's typically fair is for the landlord to cover external improvements or common area improvements, and the tenant to cover improvements and repairs within their own premises that they're leasing. But you can get more slanted towards the landlord or more slanted towards the tenant based on how you negotiate things. And also, who's going to pay for the construction that takes place prior to you moving in. You want to make sure that whatever you need to do to improve the place for your use or change the place for your use is hopefully baked into the lease itself. If not, you want to make sure that it's at least completed by the time that you move in, and you have some protections in place if the work isn't completed by the time that you move in. So if you have any questions, you can leave them below this post at learn-about-law.com in the comments section, or below the video on our YouTube station. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to us on YouTube, iTunes, and SoundCloud to get updates on our daily article and video topics. If you need some help, give us a call at 630-324-6666. That's 630-324-6666. We have offices all around Chicagoland for your convenience, and we offer free consultations. Thank you so much for watching and listening.
Thanks so much for watching our video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Click the subscribe button for new videos every week, and download and review us on iTunes. Visit learn-about-law.com for other legal-related articles and videos. Visit our business podcast and video blog, seizeyourbusiness.com, and visit Making Real Estate Fun for real estate videos and podcasts. Call us at 630-324-6666 for a free consultation.